Modified my steering system, and we're going to start by extending the gear shift. If you take a little flat screwdriver and just right there where the reverse slot is, if you just gently put down a little bit and lift under that, you can pop that cap right off. Be careful of those three little tabs. You don't want to break them. Okay, now take a small Phillips and go right down inside that. And there's a Phillips screw in there, and you unscrew that and you take that off. Okay, save that screw. Okay, now to extend the shift, you need a box store 1/4 inch nipple, brass, chrome plated, 4-inch long. And you'll take that nipple and cut. It'll come with threads on either end, and you cut the threads off both ends. And when you do it, and then you cut the exact length, its total will be 2 1/8 inches on your total length, and that's important. 2 1/8 inches. Then you'll take, I took a piece of tape and put it on. I showed you on this one here. Took a piece of tape and come around both sides of that, and then I took that and I run that in my bandsaw to cut that flat spot. And you want to cut that back, let me get my 3/4 of an inch, and that's important. So this cut right here is 3/4 of an inch. So you cut with your bandsaw or hacksaw, and you cut back 3/4 of an inch, cut it through that way, and then cut it off. And then you follow through on that, and the top side you come back 7/8 of an inch, and you grind that flat perpendicular to that cut. And what you're trying to achieve is making this the same as that D on that shaft coming up. And then this is where the shifter knob used to set down on there, and that'll set down on there like that. You'll need a pan head about 2 inches long. It's you can get them at Lowe's, Home Depot, whatever, box store, hardware stores, and it'll be a 4mm 0.7 by 50mm screw. And this is very important. And what you'll do is take this and slide it up into your gear shift knob where that D is, like so. And then you'll set that on that gear shift, and you'll drop your screw down in there. Get your Phillips screwdriver and tighten it up. And now you've extended your gear shift. I got them screws out right now, but you extend your gear shift, okay? So now let me go ahead and take this off and show you how I modified the circuit board and brought some wires up and put a switch right here at the knob. Now, I've got this sub-assembled just to speed this video up, so bear with me here a minute. Okay, we'll set that aside. And you have to do is take these, they're number 10 wrench, and loosen these bottom nuts up and take them off. Now I've already taken them out, but there's some long screws in there, and the one screw is already screwed up in there, and it'll hold these. I dropped it, hold on. This leg goes up in there like so, and there's a nut on the top and the bottom. You take all that off, set that aside, okay? Then you'll take a 2.5 inch Allen wrench and take these 6 screws here out for that boot. Now when you take that boot off originally, there's going to be a little plastic bezel on that actually holds that down. You have to take that bezel off and remove it. And I'll show you why in a minute. Okay, once you get this off, then you have to turn the unit over and there's 4 screws. I got one in there, and then there's one that goes here, and there's 2 way down in. And just to speed things up, I got the other 3 removed. Alright, and that takes your base off. Now, you come in here, and there's 8 screws that have to be removed, and I've got 6 of them already removed. I'll take the final ones out. Then turn it back over. I just opened my drawer right here just for these purposes. Then there's 3 screws way down in them 3 holes. You have to take them out. I've already removed them just to speed this up. Now you separate the top from the bottom. When you turn it over, you have to unplug, and be very careful with them wires. You unplug those two plugs. Okay? And you set this off to the side momentarily. And let's concentrate on this piece right here. Now, there'll be this screw right here. Take that out, and there's 6 little screws that holds that circuit board in. You have to take them out. Okay? Then gently lift that circuit board out of there. Okay? Now, you have to trace which button you were going to use for your splitter. On mine, I happen to use the top one, so it'll be this button right here. When you trace that circuit, it happens to be, I don't know if you can see this, it happens to be this circuit right here. You take your wire, you trim the end of it off, and you solder tip it. I showed that in an earlier video. And then gently go down there and hold that wire. Now what I do is I got a soldering clamping device that I was able to put that in to hold that for me. Then you can hold your soldering gun and your new wire, and you just touch that on this side. Okay, and that's the circuit for that button. Now you can put it on any button you want, but you have to follow the circuit. In my case, it happened to be this one right here. Okay? You solder that on there. Just touch a solder real quick. You don't want to be there very long. If you pre-tin it like I said, you won't have any trouble. Now, take your other wire and turn the board over and find a common ground. And you got to follow the circuit to find that ground. And when you find that ground, you solder your other wire to that. Then you take your glue gun and put a dab of glue to hold that wire in place. And when you do that, and then you also put your little dab of hot glue right there and a little dab right there, and then you got your wires. Now your total length of your wires need to be about 10 inches. Okay? Now I put some shrink wrap on that. That's purely an option. Now, let me caution you. this has happened to me, so I know. If you flip this over, all of them buttons are going to jump out of you. And there's 12, there's 4 red ones, 4 black ones, and then there's 4 for the center. And if you turn it over, they're all going to fall all over the floor and go wherever. Dog can eat them, the cat will eat them, whatever. Okay? So just be careful you don't turn that upside down. That's experience talking. Now, we can put the circuit board back in, and you've got to be careful of that light. That light has to go in that little hole right there. So you got to be careful when you're putting this back in. You got to put it under this little tab and gently push it in until that light falls in place. And you'll know when it's seated. Now proceed to put all them little screws back in. Don't over tighten these. Okay, I'm going to finish putting the screws in. I'll be right back. Get all your screws back in. That's why I put that shrink wrap on there, just to help protect them when the thing's all put back together. You take them wires and you run them through this hole right here to come out where the shifter, this will come up through the shifter. Okay? Now, I'll put the shifter back together. Now when I plug these back in, you want to be very careful like I mentioned earlier, but make sure they're plugged in securely. Okay, now gently bring your wire up and out. And put your long screws in first. Should be 3 of them. That's all I did with them. That'll temporarily hold the whole thing together for you. Here again, I caution, do not over tighten these screws. Now you'll have 8 of the little black screws that'll go in the bottom. Let me stop this until I put them 8 screws on the bottom. Okay, now we can put our clamp back on. So to put the clamp on, we got to put it in, drop it down in them slots, and put the 4 screws to hold the clamp together. Screws into the clamp. I got them all started, I'm just tightening them up. Now to put them deep ones in there, if you got a Phillips, a small Phillips that's magnetized, it sure makes it easier. Now you can go ahead and put you can clamp this back to a temporary board like I got right here, just to facilitate you. Then you put these clamps back together, and you'll take your rod and run your rod through there first and put one of the nuts on it. And then you got to run it way up on the okay. Now you put your clamp on and drop that nut on the top part. You'll see how to do that. The lighting ain't real good right here, but that'll go in there like so. I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. You got to put this nut in there and push it down in there. It'll stay in there by itself. And then put a nut on it, run it up a little ways. Make sure you have a nut in the bottom of the clamp, and put that up in there at an angle and start screwing that all the way down until it starts going into that clamp on the bottom. And you gotta be careful you don't cross thread it. And you get it about like that, and then you run it all the way down until it comes out the bottom. And then you put one of them nuts you put your acorn nut on the bottom of that. And you tighten that up with your number 10. Now your clamps are back together. And you do that. I already got the nut started on the rod. You lift the rod up, drop it in there, and make sure the nut on the rod falls into the plastic clamp, and then screw it down until it engages the screw on the bottom that you're holding up with your finger. And then there's a hole on the very bottom. You put it in there and run it down till the threads stick out long enough. Put your acorn nut back on. And hold your number 10 wrench and tighten that. Do that to both sides. Make sure them are tight. Okay. Now, this little plug, I made a male, this switch, I took it out of an old computer, and I had this piece of 1/2-inch plastic, and I drilled a 3/8 hole on this end. I drilled a 1/4-20, well, it was a little bit smaller, I don't know the size off my head, but I drilled and tapped a 1/4-20 on this end, so when you put this down on side your new shifter, I can never remember where I put stuff. Your Allen wrench then will hold that in place when you get ready for it. Okay, let me take that off for the time being now. Okay, but I took and made the male plug to fit that female plug. Now, you leave that plastic off the top of that bezel. It was glued on. You may have to pry it to get it off, but you leave that off, and you feed that little plug up through that hole. And what I do, use some hemostats and just gently pull that through the plug, and put the cap back down on there. Then go ahead and put your 6 screws back in place. Okay, I'll be right back. Back in there. Again, do not over tighten. All right, now your little wire and my little switch that I made, I got to match the white and the black. I plugged that together. Now before I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. You need to take a black zip tie or a O-ring, which I used, and slide that down and roll it on the shaft. Could have used a bigger O-ring, but that's what I had on hand. Be right back. That'll hold it to the shaft and hold your wire, and I use the O-ring because it wouldn't pinch the wires. Now my switch, you could drill this out and put a toggle switch in there, spring-loaded one-way toggle switch. Any kind of press button switch will work. I put a little set screw on here to hold the switch in place, and then I had the quarter 20 set screw in the back. Now I'll plug this in. And then I'll slide this down the shaft. Got too much wire sticking out, but that's... Okay. Now I'll take, if I can find it, shift lever that's still up in there, and I'll gently bring it down. Then I took my shift button and I gently raised it up so it's about the right height for my finger. Then I tightened my set screw. And you can adjust this a little bit as you go to get it just where you want it. Put your cap back on it. And there you have it. There you have it. Now I'm going to shut off this, and I'm going to go put this all back together, and I'll show you how it all works hooked up to the computer. Okay, I'm back. Everything's all hooked back up. We'll show you how the button works here once it loads. Alright, I need to start my motor. Okay, I'll put it in gear. As you can see, it's third gear. So I'm going to push the button. And you can see it went to ninth. If I pull it out and go into first, that'd be seventh. If I push the button, it'll drop down to first. If I was in seventh and I needed a downshift, go right to sixth. Now you can still use the old splitter button. And there you have it. The button right there on the shift makes it so much nicer, and it adds a whole lot more realism to it. I used to drive over the road trucks, and they always had the air shifter right there underneath the top of the shift lever. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to call me.